If you love granny stitches, this fun blanket is for you. It is possible to make it from small to a larger throw. So something maybe for a baby shower up to your own personal blanket to just cuddle up on the couch with. For today's project, you're definitely going to need some yarn, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, we're going to talk about the hook you need. You need a size 5mm H hook, and you can use any brand you like. This is the Dots hook from We Crochet, which I do enjoy. Scissors to cut those ends, and a yarn needle to weave them in. But otherwise, this is a pretty simple project. What you might want as well as blocking mats and pins, because it is smart to block these to make it look really nice, a nice perfect blanket. However, if you don't have those, you can always just use pins and lay out a towel on your bed and pin it down that way to block it. Now let's talk about the yarn. So this is one colorway I did where we are using 4 different tones of yarn, which was super fun to do. So I'm using the Herrschners worsted yarn. Here's the cool thing about this yarn is it comes in different sizes. So this is the worsted jumbo, and this packs an entire 743 yards in one ball. So it's nice that you don't have as many ends to weave in if you're working with these big skeins of it. Then we also have the worsted 8 yarn, and these come in 489 yards. So still a lot of yardage there. And then they also have one size smaller. So you can always decide what size you want if you want yarn left over or not. The colorways I'm using, this is their Ivory. This is the Sleet. This is the Glacier, and this is the Clay. I love the colors here. I love the combination. You can see I've got this one in the works here, and we'll be switching colors after rounds when we make these granny squares to get this beautiful colorway. Now let's talk about if you only wanted to use 2 colors of yarn. Now I wanted to show you what it would look like if you just made this with 2 colors of yarn. One is this beautiful color changing yarn. This is the Ferris Wheel by Lion Brand. It is also available on the Herrschners website. You should check out all the colors. They're incredible. And I'm still using this worsted jumbo yarn. Now this one at times I feel like might be a little bit thinner than this. So just watch your tension when you are working with it to make sure that the gauge stays consistent. This is so fun because with each granny square, it looks a little bit different in those colors and those tones and adds a nice pop, almost like a stained window glass pane, which is why I wanted to use this one. But you can use any color you want. Go to the Herrschners website and look at both these yarn lines and the amazing colors they come in. I've made a couple practice squares, obviously haven't blocked them yet, but these are so fun to do because you can match your own home decor, or you can go seasonal. You can make a Christmas blanket with this. You could match a baby's room for a customized gift for the colors that they're using. The possibilities are endless, which is why it's going to be hard for you to choose. It was hard for me to choose. So let's go ahead and get started with this blanket by first talking about the construction. So now the blankets that I made are the smallest size. We have 6 total granny squares across, and they come in 2 rows. So we'll end up making 2 strips like this per blanket. You'll just have more granny squares if you're doing a wider blanket, depending on the size that you want to make. And then we'll also be making the center of the blanket in these gorgeous granny stitches with changing some color every other row so that we have those pops of dots, which is really nice to have too. So you'll end up having the center body piece and then 2 strips of the granny squares, and I did a join as you go method, so we're going to talk about that when we get to that point. It makes it a lot easier, and then when we are done with those, we're going to talk about how we are going to seam those together. So let's start at step 1 and let's make a granny square. Now we're going to start round 1 with color A, and for the example I'm showing, I'm using Sleet. And if you're changing colors on other rounds, instead of just working with 2 yarns, but you're working with 4, then we will address that as we go, but you'll be changing colors later on as well. So this will only be for round 1 that we're using this Sleet color A, or the color of your choice. Now we're going to go ahead and make a magic ring or magic circle, insert our hook, and chain 1 to get it started. So now that we have that, we're going to be working our stitches for round 1 inside this magic ring. We're going to start by doing a stacked single crochet. So I basically complete a single crochet. That's what we just did. And now I'm going to go through that second line there, so that far left horizontal line, insert my hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Now, if you are like me and sometimes you just don't want to have to pay attention to rounds, it's never a bad idea to go ahead and grab a stitch marker and mark that as the first stitch of this round, especially with those stacked single crochets because they're so clean, you might work on the side of it. And now we are going to chain 2. Now our next step is to do 3 double crochets and a chain 2 inside that ring. And we're going to do that 3 times. So that's 3 double crochets and a chain 2. There's our second 3 double crochet and chain 2. And there's our third 3 double crochet and chain 2. And now we're going to do 2 more double crochets inside this magic ring. And we can go ahead and start to pull that closed. And now we're going to remove our stitch marker and slip stitch to the top of that stacked single crochet. Now at this point, we can go ahead and we can tighten that magic ring and we can even fasten off the color A. Now we're going to be bringing in our color B, which for this one is the Ivory. And we're going to go into this next space, so this chain 2 space, and we're going to yarn over with the Ivory and slip stitch. And now we're set up to start working in that chain 2 space. Now for the first stack single crochet, I like to work over the tail end too. It just makes it easier. Or you can substitute this by simply chaining 2. So we'll insert that chain 2 space, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, go back through that left bar, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. Now we're going to chain 2, and working into the same space, we are going to double crochet 3. Chain 1, and now we're going to be working into the next chain 2 space. And our next steps we'll do 3 times. So we're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets all into that chain 2 space. And then chain 1. And now we're going to repeat that 2 more times for a total of 3 repeats. Now that we've done those repeats, we are going to be working the next 2 double crochets into that first space that we started with. So we're working into that next space, which is our first space we started with, and we're going to do 2 double crochets into that space. And now we're back to the beginning, and this is our stacked single crochet, and we're going to work a slip stitch into that. Now at this point, you can go ahead and fasten off that color B. Now you'll notice I did go ahead and weave in my tail ends that I had so far off camera because I think it will just make it cleaner in this video to not have those distracting tails while learning this. Now we're going to move on to our next color. Now I am using this beautiful blue, but in the pattern it'll be labeled color A. If you are using only 2 colors, you're going to go back to the color that you had started with. This will be our color C, and for this video I'm going to be using this blue. So I'm going to go through that next chain space, yarn over with my new color and slip stitch, and then I'm going to do a stacked single crochet, chain 2. In the same space, we're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 1, and then 3 double crochet and chain 1 into that next chain 1 space. Now we're going to talk about our repeat around. So here's where our repeat starts. We're going to do kind of what we did before. We're doing a lot of the same things on the corners as we go here. We're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets all into that same space, and then chain 1. Now after working the 3 double crochet, chain 2, 3 double crochet into that corner, and then chaining 1, we're going to work 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space and chain 1. And that's going to be our repeat that we're going to be doing around. Now as we come to the end of this round, we've done our repeats and we're going to work 2 more double crochets into that first space. And then we're going to slip stitch to join to the first stitch of the round. And now I'm going to go ahead and fasten off again. And but do not fasten off if you're working 2 colors. If you are working 2 colors, do not fasten off. You'll continue to work the color A for the next round. But I'm going to go to my color D for this round. And I am using the color Clay. So we are going to go into that chain 2 space, pull up a loop, and then start our round the same way we've been starting the last couple of rounds by doing a stacked single crochet, chaining 2, and then 3 double crochets into that same space. Chain 1, and then 3 double crochets and a chain 1 into each of the next 2 spaces. Now this is where we're going to be starting to do our repeat that will be our repeat all the way around. We are going to do the 3 double crochet, and then we will chain 2 and 3 double crochet all on the corner. And then chain 1. And then we're going to do 3 double crochets and a chain 1 into each of the next 2 spaces. And that's going to be our repeat around. And as you can tell, we're just working a classic granny square right now, but it's the next round. It's round number 5 where we see a little bit of a different pop going on. So repeat this all the way around. As we get to the end of this round, we're going to do 2 more double crochets into the first space of the round and then join. And we can go ahead and fasten off either our color D, which is what I worked here, or your color A. Now for the final round, and this is a fun one, we're going to slip stitch with our color B. We're going back to the color B. This is going to be the final round. And then we're going to start by doing that stacked single crochet. This is the round that makes all the difference in making this granny square really unique, because at this point it's just a simple granny square. Now we're going to do 3 double crochets into that first space, chain 1, 3 double crochets into that next space, chain 1, and now in this next space we're going to start by doing 1 double crochet. And then we're going to be working around, we're going to go down to round 2 and we're going to go to the left stitch. So the far left stitch down here from round 2. So it's this one right here. We're going to be working around this stitch. We're going to yarn over 3 times. We're going to do a double treble here. We're going to go around that stitch, so working a post stitch, yarn over, pull that through, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through the final 2. You want to make sure that this isn't puckering or pulling this down. You want it to have enough space to look great. And now we're going to be doing that again, but we're going to be doing it over here on this stitch from round 2. So we're going to the right side here down below. So it's the one here. We're going to yarn over 3 times, go around that stitch, and then we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and keep pulling through 2, keeping that tension a little bit loose until you've worked all of the stitches on the hook. And that is how that window pane look comes in play there. It's just crisscrossing this last edge here. Now we're going to yarn over and double crochet 1 into that same space. So yes, we are placing 4 stitches in that space. Now we're going to chain 1, and do 3 double crochets into the next and chain 1. So I'm gonna do that one more time with you, and we are gonna be working along this edge, and this will be our repeat around. So we're going to do 3 double crochets, chain 2, and then 3 double crochets, chain 1, and then 3 double crochet into the next chain 1 space and chain 1. And then here we are at that special stitch there. We're going to do 1 double crochet into that space. We're going to yarn over 3 times, work a front treble on the left stitch there, straight down below from round 2. And then we're going to yarn over 3 times again. Tension is the key for this double treble. Takes some practice sometimes, so don't be afraid to undo it and try it again. And then double crochet in that same space, chain 1, and 3 double crochets and chain 1 into the next chain 1 space. And that's going to be our repeat all the way around. Now after working all the way around, we are going to do 2 double crochets into that first space. And then instead of slip stitching to join, I'm going to fasten off and show you how to do it in invisible join, but you will only do it for your first square of the section, because the rest of the squares we would not be fastening off at this point, and we're going to do a join as you go, which I'm going to show you next. But first I want to show you on your very first one, you will need to fasten off and create a join here. Now the best way to do this is to go not into the first stitch of the round, but the second, as if you're going to crochet it. Pull that yarn through and then go back down through the top of the last stitch worked. It creates a mock stitch over that first stitch, so we're not adding any stitches. It's the same stitch count, but you can't tell where we started. Now here comes the fun part of doing the join as you go method. I have worked this up to round 5, and now I'm going to grab and have the ones I've already joined together, the fabric that we are creating, and we're going to join down this side and this side, along this side and this side. Now there are lots of different methods for joining granny squares, so you should use the one that you're most comfortable with, but I also want to show you one that I used for this. And that's that we are going to be working the rest of this round, but first inserting into the fabric that we want to join to. So working halfway through this point, I have one more chain stitch to do, but I'm going to insert through this first loop, so just the top loop of the stitch, that is a corresponding stitch to this side. So the chain 1 on this side, and I'm going to be working a chain 1 on this side. And now I'm simply going to yarn over and work that chain 1. So pulling through both loops. Then I'm going to insert into my next loop and then work here as we would. So that's a double crochet. And we're just going to ignore that extra loop and complete that double crochet. So insert into the next double crochet, and we're just going to pretend like these two are one stitch, yarn over, do that double crochet, pulling through these as if they are one stitch. So the 2 loops that end up on your hook when you insert on this side are going to be, pretend that these are one loop, and then we'll work the stitch as is. And what that does is it creates a nice join without any extra work. This is like really nice along here, and we're just going to join as we go. Now I'm going to show you how to do I think the toughest part, the trickiest part, I guess you could say, of these double trebles when I get to that point. Now that we are to these double trebles, we're simply going to insert into that stitch on the side we're joining with, into that one loop, and then yarn over 3 times, and then work down to that round 2, and then once we get to this point where we have 3 loops, but really we're counting this as one, we're just going to yarn over and pull through all. And that's how that does the nice join there. I think this is the trickiest part, just because it's a little bit fickly working all this fabric together that's sitting here, but it's worth it to me to join as I go and not have to stitch these together later. However, if you prefer to stitch these together later, please feel free to do so. You should always do the join that you like the most. You don't always have to stick to what the designer is doing in the pattern if you prefer a different method. So I'm going to continue to work these all the way around, just working each stitch through each stitch, including those chain ones on the corners, all the way around till I get to this point. And just a reminder, when you get to this edge, you'll still want to insert into that first chain on this fabric we're working into, and then chain one for this round, and then continue to work in pattern for the last edge. And then you can join with a slip stitch, or you can fasten off and do that invisible join just like we did on the previous square when we get to the end of this round. And we'll keep doing that until you have the amount of connected squares that you want for the size that you're working. For this one, there's 12 total squares on top and bottom of this blanket. And at this point, once you have all these done, ends woven in, block it. It is a really good idea to block it to dimension because it will just make seaming these pieces together much easier. Now, to create the center of the blanket, we're going to start with a very long chain. Depending on what size you're making, we're going to start by going into the very first chain from the hook. I like to work into these back humps, and we're going to do a stacked single crochet. And if you're new to stacked single crochets, definitely grab a stitch marker to mark the top stitch of that, at the top of that stitch for the first stitch of this row. That way it's easy to keep track of. And I have a slower tutorial for the stacked single crochet in the pattern. Now we're going to simply double crochet into every single chain across. Now when it comes to the granny stitches in rows, we're not going to be changing stitch counts. The stitch count will stay exactly the same for each row. And it's technically a 1 row repeat when it comes to working those stitches, but because we're changing colors here, it's a 4 row color repeat so that we get all that color working opposite of each other in there. Now I'm going to be working it on camera for this next part by just showing you 2 colors. But if you were to work it like this example, we are going to be changing in between your colors as you change those for each row. You're just keeping it in that pattern, but the actual stitches will remain the same, which makes this super easy. Now, whenever you are working a right side row, that's when you're going to be working these colorful stitches along with your main color, and we will be rotating between those and keeping the yarn on the back of the work. Whenever you're working a wrong side row, it'll just be in your color B in that color only, and we will be fastening off at the end of some of these rows because we'll need to join the new colors, but you can keep your color B attached at all times and you'll never have to fasten that one off as you work this next section. Now, after doing your very first row, we're going to start by working with our 2 colors. We're still working this first part in the color B, and then we'll add in the color A. Now to start this row, we're going to start by doing a stacked single crochet into the very first stitch. And then we are going to mark it if we need to. And between the first 2 stitches from the row below, we're going to do 2 more double crochets. This will be the only row where it's going to have to be a bit more conscious of where we're placing our stitches. It gets much easier on row 3 for the rest of this. So what I want to do is I want to change colors. This is our very first granny group, and I want to change colors before we work the next granny group. So what we will do on that last yarn over of your last stitch is we are going to bring in the color A and yarn over with our new color so that we're set up to work the next set. We're going to drop the color B to the back of our work, and then we're going to work between the stitches until we get to the end of the row. So we're not working on the top, we're working between these groups of stitches. So this is a group of 3. So we're going to skip the next 3 and work between and work 3 double crochets. But on our last double crochet, we're going to stop before that last yarn over, pick up the color B and yarn over with the color B to complete that stitch. You can adjust if you need to adjust those stitches to be just perfect. And then we're going to skip 3 and work between into the next space for the next 3 double crochet granny group. And once again, as we get to that last yarn over, we're going to grab our color A, yarn over, and pull through. But notice on the back of the work how I'm carrying my yarn. I'm just simply carrying my yarn here, not too tight, making sure that it's not going to bunch up the fabric, but also not too loose. And we're going to be tightening these down as we work the next row, but for now we're just going to gently carry them across the back of our work as we go. So we'll skip 3 and do 3 double crochets. We're going to keep working this all the way across, going back and forth between the colors until we get to the end of this row. Now, as we get to the end of this row, we have 3 stitches left. We're going to change back to that color B, move our stitch marker, and simply double crochet into that last stitch on the edge of this fabric. Now for the wrong side rows, like I've said, they are only worked in one color. You can go ahead and fasten off your color A or whatever alternate color you're using. We won't be able to use it on the round after the next because we're starting from the opposite side. So we do have to fasten off and weave in quite a few ends here. So now we're going to turn our work. And the stitches will be the same count, same stitches, same concept. But I want to show it on a wrong side row because now we have all these floats here, plus we're going to be working into these spaces instead of like working through these double crochet stitches. So we're going to start this row by doing a stacked single crochet into the very first stitch, and then do 2 double crochets into that very first space. And now we're going to work into the next space, but we're always going to be working underneath these yarn floats. So we don't want to work on top of them, we want to work underneath them. So we're going to work underneath them, working the granny group, the 3 double crochet stitches into that space. And that also tightens down those floats. They're not as long, they're less likely to catch on any fingers or toes. It really helps make that float a lot less, but still really pretty on the front, and they're just hidden on the back. So we'll work this all the way across until we get to the very end, and just like the previous row, we'll double crochet into that last stitch, and I'll show you how to do that when we get there, and I'll work the beginning of the last row repeat on camera here. Now we are to the last stitch of row 3, and we're going to work a double crochet in that last, but since the first stitch of our next row will be in our color A, we're going to yarn over that last stitch, setting ourselves up to start with the color A. And so this row we're going to start by doing a stacked single crochet in the color A, 2 double crochets in that first space, and we're going to, on that last yarn over, switch back to that color B, just pulling it gently up the sides so we don't have to weave in the end or fasten it off, and then continue in that repeat for this row. Now for row 5, we're simply going to be doing a repeat of the previous row, so just working all the way across in the color B. And rows 2 through 5 are the repeat for working these colors. Now, like I said, if you're working other colors into here, you're just going to alternate between them in pattern on the rows that you want. You can get really colorful with this. This is working just with 2 yarns, which is also fun. It changes colors by itself. And for this size of blanket, we want to work a total of about 42 rows for the center of this. Now that is adjustable. You can make it longer or shorter as you like. Now, one thing to remember as we get started with slip stitching these edges together is you can block your work to make it a little bit easier. You can block them to be the exact same size, making sure that they are. Sometimes when it comes to working granny squares and then working stitches in rows, the sizing will be a little bit different in gauge. So you can block them to make this nice and clean, or you can join and block it after. Now, after you have your pieces built, it's time for us to join these together. You do not have to fasten off on the body, and you can go right into joining on this side, and then we'll rejoin on the other side when we attach that. So let's talk about how to do this. The stitches are not going to line up one for one, so it's best to take a stitch marker or some pins and pin it together across so that everything stays even as we work back and forth joining these two pieces of fabric. I'm just using the stitch markers today. It just keeps it so that I know how to keep it even across as I get to each stitch marker. It will save you headaches later. So I've gone ahead and done that, and now we're going to go ahead and start joining this together. Now to join this together, I like to go through one of the loops on the side of the granny squares. So right on the corner, so the stitch, that chain one stitch, that would be that corner, and then insert into the stitch on the current side, so the body side, yarn over and pull up a loop. Now I am working the yarn kind of from underneath here, but you can work it on top if you want. It's really just about slip stitching these edges together. So you can go through the loop here, you can just go through one loop here, whatever you think works best to work this all the way across. Now, when it comes to the extra fabric, we might have more stitches on one side versus the other. We want to keep this super even. So when it comes to reducing some of that fabric on one side and not doing a 1-for-1 stitch, when you get to a chain one space, you can simply skip it, go to the next stitch, and then work that. It'll help it work out nice and even, and you just keep working across. And if you find you've got extra fabric on one side versus the other, we're just going to skip stitches on one side. It won't show, it'll look great. And we want to just slip stitch these pieces of fabric evenly all the way across until they are joined. And then when it comes to working the other side, we're just going to rejoin our yarn on one edge and then work it all the way across, slip stitching those edges together. Now, as we get to the end of joining these, we are going to fasten off and then weave in those ends. And next we will be doing the border of the blanket. Now for this cute border, I've done a really fun stitch. Once again, if you want to make this your own style and you don't want to do a scallop style edge, you can just double crochet around and make it more flat. But I want to show you a variation doing it in the complementary color. So this is just done in the main color that I used for the pattern, keeping it nice and simple. But I thought on camera I would show you with this Ferris wheel fun color around the edges to show that you can mix it up. Just know I calculated the yardage for this border. And if you are changing, the yardage might change as you're using a different color on the edge. Now this border will consist of 2 rounds. The first round we're going to be working a fun stitch to even it out. It's really simple and plain. And then the second round we'll be adding more of that scalloped edge. And we're simply going to join. I like to join near a corner. I think it's a little bit more incognito for the join. And we're just going to join near, just maybe right after a corner to make this a little bit easier. And then we are going to work a single crochet stitch into that first stitch. And this is, you can mark this as the beginning of the round. And now we're going to be working a really fun stitch all the way around. This is almost like combining 2 rounds in one. I used to slip stitch all the way around and then come back and single crochet in the back loop, only those slip stitches, but this way I found is much faster. So we're going to insert into the left bar of that single crochet stitch we just did. And then into the next stitch we're going to work, yarn over and pull through that stitch and pull through the first loop on the hook, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And that's going to be our repeat all the way around. So through that left bar, into that next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, pull through the first loop on the hook, yarn over and pull through both loops. And by working it this way, by inserting into that left bar and then the next stitch, what we're doing is we're creating a nice line, like a very clean edge that is nice and crisp. And we're going to do that in 1 round versus what I used to do in 2. So I like working it this way for the way that it looks. And it also helps kind of even out our stitches and makes the next round look a lot cleaner when we have this first round that finishes it off nicely. Look how nice that is looking along there. I adore it. So we're going to work this all the way around. And when you do work on corners, we're going to work into those corners by working some chain stitches on those edges so that they don't pucker too much. And I'm going to show you that when I get to this first corner. Now, as we get to this corner, we're going to be working into the chains on the corner as if they are stitches. And then we'll chain 1 in between to give it that sharper look. So I've worked into 1. I'm simply going to chain 1. And then go back through that left bar go into the next chain or chain space and work another one. And then just keep working around that corner. Keep working that all the way around. Now, when working along the edges of the center of this body where it was double crochet stitches, we're simply going to be working 2 of these edge stitches per row on the edge of the body. So we don't have exact stitches to work into, but we're just going to kind of estimate there working 2 stitches per row. And just make sure that it keeps the fabric nice and clean, that we don't have any puckering and we don't have any bulging. So just work it along those edges, inserting wherever you can at approximately 2 stitches per row. Now that we are back at the beginning, we are going to slip stitch to the first stitch of this round and then go ahead and chain 1. And now we're going to single crochet into that first stitch, chain 2, and then work 2 double crochets all into that same stitch. And then we will skip 2. And then we'll single crochet into the next, chain 2, 2 double crochets into that same stitch, and skip 2. And that's our repeat around for this border. So that's single crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochets into that same stitch, and then skip 2. And I work it evenly around the corners. I don't do any extra chaining. I just work into those stitches and it works out quite nicely. And look at how easy it is to do that nice edging with only working those stitches and skipping 2. It's a really quick and fun and relaxing border to create. Now you can see how I can just work into the stitches around the corner and it works out nicely. We don't need to do anything fancy. We're just working for those stitches as instructed around the corners, and it looks nice. And now when you get back to the beginning of the round, if you find that you don't have 2 stitches to skip and you only skip 1, that's okay. You can just do that to make it work out and then join to the first stitch of the round and fasten off and weave in those ends. And I love how different these blankets look from each other, being in the different colors. It's really cool to experiment as you go, see what color combinations you like. In the ad-free PDF, I've included these color charts where you can print and color in your own colors to decide what colorways you might want to go with to kind of play around with that color. It's a really fun bonus inside that ad-free PDF. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you come back for more fun tutorials soon.